All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to Harlem Speaks, the flagship public program of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. I'm Greg Thomas, and on behalf of Loren Schoenberg, Executive Director, and Christian McBride, Co-Director, and the board and staff of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, I welcome you to Harlem Speaks, where tonight's guest is the one and only Sonny Fortune. As usual, there's some special friends who come to check out our guests.
Oh boy.
All right, so welcome.
What you doing there, girl?
Welcome, man. All right. So, let's start with when and where you were born.
Well, I was born in Philadelphia. City of brotherly love.
Okay. All right.
And I think that's the answer to the first question.
That's where you were born.
Okay.
When were you
When? 1939.
born? 1939.
Yes.
All right. All right. And mom and dad, tell us their names and,
Well,
and tell us about your family.
my father's, the name was Cornelius as well as mine. And my mother's name was Margaret.
Okay.
And basically, they were just people that worked. They weren't into the music business in any way. Matter of fact, music came to me in a weird kind of a way because I don't have any, as far as family or associates, I don't have any point of reference except I probably would relate best to a period that Bill Cosby talks about in the past, where he says that when he's living in Philly, he used to walk through the streets with his albums, his Miles, Blue Haze, and whatever, to go over and see his girlfriend. Well, that was around the same time that I started
Getting into the music?
well, I started turning the other way because I was really, prior to that, I was into like doo-wop.
Okay. Now, the period you're talking about, that Bill Cosby was talking about, would be when?
That was around in the mid and late 50s.
Mid to late 50s. Okay, so by that time, you're in your late teens. So before we get there, let's talk about your upbringing in Philly. Now, do you have brothers and sisters?
Nope.
Okay, so you were only child.
Yep.
All right. So how would you describe your early years in Philly, coming up in the 40s?
Well, I couldn't wait to be an adult, for starters. I do remember, when I think back, I remember having a lot of fun and whatnot, and like most kids. But I often hear adults say, well, I would like to be whatever, or younger or whatever. I've never given that a thought. I remember when I was younger, I wanted to hurry up and grow up. And I think maybe, if anything, I may have grown up too fast, because I got married when I was 16. So that was a bad start right there. By the time I was 18, I had a wife and 2 kids.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
No, 19.
All right. Okay, so in the 40s, 50s, mid-50s, before you got married, the main music you were into was doo-wop.
Doo-wop. The Clovers, the Drifters, the Orioles, those guys.
Okay.
I was singing bass.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever sing in any groups?
Oh, God. I sang in a number of groups, but I remember one group that was embarrassing. We sang in a group in elementary school, in junior high school, and none of us knew anything about music. So we're getting ready to do this. We were a part of this play, and we needed a rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
So, so we go to the men's room, and we sing to get ready.
Yeah, the good acoustics.
Yeah,
in there,
to get ready for when we go on stage to sing
right.
in front of our girlfriends and people that knew us and our teachers and everybody. We were in the auditorium. The place was packed with people and whatnot. And we were part of this play that was called well, I don't know what the play was called, but we were called the Harps. And somebody said something about, and I hear the harps. And we came out and started trying to sing. We knew nothing about keys,
Okay.
so that was a bummer from the very beginning. One of us was one place, someone was somewhere else, and,
Right.
the lead singer, he started laughing.
Oh no! I mean, it was so bad that you couldn't help but laugh.
I saw my teacher; she was ashamed.
Oh.
My girlfriend was like upset. I mean, it was a really embarrassing. We was all over. I mean, we messed that thing up in the worst kind of a way. So with that being taken into consideration, that was part of my singing in the doo-wop groups.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Now, we kind of accelerating kind of fast. Now, so doo-wop was the main style that you were into, but there was all other kind of styles that you still heard in the neighborhood, on the radio, I presume. Would you say so?
Yeah.
And what are some of the other styles?
Well, when I heard jazz, because there was a guy in Philly named Jocko that used to play jazz.
Okay, on the radio.
On the
station?
radio.
Okay, what do you know?
And I
remember
used to
the station?
Go right past that station.
Oh,
I wouldn't listen to it at all.
okay. What did you associate? What did you associate with at the time? Take yourself back, and what made you just turn right? Just lack of familiarity. What was it that made you not gravitate to it early on?
Jazz?
Yeah.
Well, it was a little too busy. It was you know, I mean, it was like I remember
Complex.
That was a word that I wasn't that familiar with
Right.
to use it in that vein then. But I have, like I said to you earlier, I have all my albums. I have the very first album I ever bought, 50-some years ago.
Okay.
And I have an album that I stole from a friend of mine around that time. That was a Charlie Parker album.
Okay.
And Charlie Parker had already been dead 2 years before I heard this record. And when I first heard his name, I had no idea who Charlie Parker was. I said, who's Charlie Parker?
Wow.
And so this friend of mine, and this was around the time Bill Cosby, when jazz was
Right.
becoming the thing. And
Right. The hip thing.
The hip thing.
Right.
And so this friend of mine bought this Charlie Parker record. And I remember, it was like, well, man, all I'm hearing is a horn. I can't hear nothing else. I don't hear no bass. I don't hear, I just not, so I didn't, it didn't do anything.
So you mentioned the first record you bought. You remember what was that first record?
Charlie Parker with strings.
After you had
After
borrowed your friend's record.
Well, I don't remember the order of that record, but I still have it.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if I stole his record after the strings or stole it before the strings.
Okay.
I think, if anything, I may have taken it after the strings.
Okay. So what made you buy? Well, that was that was Bird's most popular recording.
Yeah.
You know. So
Yeah.
I guess it might have been around. But what was it that made you buy that?
Well, because that was easier to understand, I think.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it was basically
More accessible.
Bird playing melodies and sounding beautiful.
Right.
It was kind of
Right.
simple.
Okay.
Melodies sounding beautiful.
Right. Okay.
You know,
Right.
and with some improvisation, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but otherwise.
Okay. All right. So that was.
So and I kind of and I bought that album because I I was trying to make a turn. I was trying to get away from
Just to do
doo-wop.
Okay.
When by the time I got to Charlie Parker with strings,
Right.
that was in an effort to start appreciating this music. And in the beginning, I guess like anything, I had to do the easy version, more or less,
That's
of Charlie
interesting.
Parker with strings.
Okay. You know, this thought came to mind that one of the things I remember when I was early to mid-20s, watching a show, I think West 57, it used to be on CBS, and they had a segment on jazz. And I remember watching this segment, and Stanley Crouch was on the segment, who I later got to know and still know. And he said that one of the things about jazz and young players is that they're playing jazz in part because they have that same desire that you had, which was to be mature, to be older, be adult, because they associate the music with that. Would you say that when you were making the transition from doo-wop to jazz, that was a part of that same thing?
Well,
the same kind of direction?
Well, what I would say was that that happened in a time in my life when I was kind of putting things together. I just got married,
Right.
Graduating from school. My last year in school, I was married.
Wow. High school. What was the high school that you went to?
Northeast.
Northeast.
Elverson, Gillespie, and Northeast. Gillespie was the junior high, Northeast was the senior high.
And Elvis was the
Elverson was elementary.
Elvis. Okay.
And
You're trying to put things together.
yeah, I mean, life was getting a little more serious for me. I mean, you know, I had a wife and a kid at the time.
Mm-hmm.
This music was coming along. I was still in school. I was trying to be a part of this music. And I thought one of the ways of grasping this music would be to get an instrument.
Okay.
And
So wait a second now. Before we go there, we're
Yeah.
gonna get there
Okay.
real soon. But let me ask you this: so you buy this first record.
yeah.
What other records did you buy before you got your instrument? Because would you say that the records had something to do, obviously, with you desiring to get an instrument at some point? So what other records, were
No,
part of
I
that?
don't know if
Really?
the record was an influence as much as it was just all trying to come together. I mean,
Okay.
I was listening to this music that I wasn't familiar with. I was trying to get acquainted with it. I had this guy by the name of Charlie Parker that played alto that I want to try to understand a little more. I don't know anything about music at all. So I talked to my pa. I said, Dad, and he said, but he was smart, my
right.
pop.
Okay.
He made it possible for me to get the horn.
What would you ask him? What did he say?
He said, yeah,
Well,
quick.
what'd you ask him? Tell us.
I asked him to
tell us
give
the
me a
story of how-
saxophone.
Okay.
And I figured a saxophone because, I don't know, saxophone. Why not?
And you were how old?
I was 18,
18.
married.
Okay.
Yeah, but he was smart. And he said, sure. And so he got the horn, but I had to pay it. And in those days, actually, we're getting ready to go back to those days. But in those days, you bought stuff on time. You didn't have credit. And
So how did it work?
so I had to pay I bought the horn and paid weekly or monthly or whatever I had to pay.
You paid your dad directly. Or you played the place where he got
No,
it
he
from?
made the down payment and left the rest up to me.
Ah.
In other words, if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have had a horn.
Okay. All right. Do you remember how much it cost back then?
Oh God, I don't know about $300, something like that.
About 300. Because when I was coming along, and I got
Well,
my,
in those days, saxophones weren't what they are today, price-wise.
Well, yeah. I mean, because the price goes up. But I was going to say that.
No, it's gotten crazy.
Oh, yeah,
No,
yeah.
It's not a question of
But
going
back
up, it's just
in
going
the,
crazy.
I got my first horn, my first alto in the
Oh,
late.
you play alto?
Yeah, I played alto. Yeah, in the
That's
late.
the hardest of the saxophones, you know. Go ahead.
To keep in tune. And stuff.
Yeah.
They say soprano though.
Well, no, you know what? I'm a firm believer. You can take a couple of steps and sound horrible on alto, but you got to walk a distance to sound horrible on tenor. It's I find it to be an easier horn to get a sound out of.
Okay.
To get an acceptable sound, I should say.
Okay.
Most of the time, the alto just doesn't sound right. I mean, that is something that I've struggled with all my career, not being satisfied with my own sound.
Wow. Okay.
And I just arrived there a few years ago, but we'll talk about that.
Wow. Look at that. Because we're going to see, he been out here a while, you know.
Absolutely.
All right. But I'm going to say that I got my first horn in the late 70s. And it was an old Con, 1917 Con. But at the time, the Selma Mach 6s, which were the Krieble horns, were $1,200. They were $1,200 back then. So it had quadruple in price from what?
A brand new Selma, when I bought my horn, because I used to get literature from the Selma company, brand new Selma was about $500. Matter of fact, I bought a brand new Mark 6 baritone when I was working with Mongo, paid over $500 for it, did not want to play that baritone anymore, and sold it for $300.
Wow.
That horn today would be worth $5,000.
Right. It was a Selma.
So I've been kind of out of my mind for a long time. But go ahead.
Should have kept that bad boy as an
I
investment,
sure
right?
should have, because that's one regret. I just didn't want to play the horn anymore because it was too heavy.
I'm with you.
Okay. All right. So
I'm not going to tell you who I sold it to.
you sold it to somebody.
That you know.
Oh. Well, why
But I
not?
told him, I'm selling it to you for this price with the understanding that if you sell it for the same price. He said, yeah. Now, I saw this person about a year and a half ago, and we were laughing. Kenny came to see me. I said, man, I want to ask you, do you still have that baritone? He said, no. I said, did you sell it for what I sold it to you for? And he laughed and kind of, so anyway.
Oh man, see, if you hadn't told that story, I would
Matter
have
of
been.
fact, I'm going to tell you who
Good.
it was.
Who was it?
It was Renee McLean, Jackie McLean's son.
Oh, really?
Since you mentioned Jackie McLean earlier to me.
Right. Okay. He doesn't play baritone.
That's because he sold mine.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, all right. So you paid off the alto. You got the alto.
Yeah.
Now, what was that? What was it like adapting yourself? I mean,
Well, when I got the horn, I thought in 6 months I was going to kill the world. And after about a year, I could barely move from C to D. I said, later for this. Because I had a family, I had a job and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I put my horn in the closet for about 2 or 3 years.
okay.
Maybe 2 years, somewhere. I know it was a long time.
Right.
It was my day job that forced me to get involved with my horn because I had been on this job.
What's the job? What were you
Well,
doing?
I was working in a corrugated box making factory. I wasn't making any money.
Yeah.
I was always going to the union complaining. Me and my boss was having hard times. And at that time, there was no schools, and there was no, and I only had one place to turn, and it was this horn in the closet.
Look at that. Okay.
And I decided around 1920 to get serious. When I was around 19 or 20.
You were 19 or
Oh,
20
19,
yourself.
right.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay.
No, not
All
19.
right.
No.
All right. I got
No,
it.
I'm not going to lie to you.
No. It sounded like you were saying in 1920.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So you got serious. Now, what did that entail?
That entailed every day disciplining myself to sit for at least 4 hours and try to practice. every day.
All right. Now, what were you practicing?
I'm
Because
practicing scales, practicing out of a saxophone book. I'm okay. Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
uh,
sorry.
saxophone book. Trying to learn my scales. Learn.
Do you remember the book?
Paul DeVille, Universal
The
Saxophone.
Universal Saxophone
Yeah,
Method.
yeah,
Yep. Same
yeah.
one I use.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kenny Rogers told me about it.
Ah. Okay.
Yes.
And it was blue with red over, and it went
No,
over
that's
this
the
way.
that was
a
the-
later version.
That was the later version.
Oh,
The
okay.
newer version, or the
Delmas.
original version, or earlier version. I don't know how long that had been out, but the earlier
That thing
version
was out since the turn of the century.
Okay, well then
That
I
thing
didn't
was
have
out a
it
long
at that
time.
point. Okay.
Yeah, but that was the book. My teacher turned me on. Speaking of teachers, did you have an early teacher?
Well, I went to saxophone teacher in the beginning for a short while, and then I studied theory and music with a theorist by the name of Roland Wiggins, who a guy I have the utmost respect for. I had the pleasure of speaking to for the first time in about, 35 years last year.
Roland Wiggins. That name sounds very
Yeah, he
familiar.
was a teacher up at Amherst for years.
Okay, that's why.
And he's doing some kind of a documentary. His daughter and his son-in-law, they came to my home to do some film footage for some stuff that he was trying to put together. And in doing so, he and I were able to talk. I haven't seen him in years, but
Wow.
so I studied with him for a while. But most of what this music, most of my learning was from being around people in Philadelphia. At that time, Philly had everybody you could think of. Being around people that knew more than me musically.
Who were some of those people?
Well, like I just mentioned to you earlier, there was a very good friend of mine by the name of Kenny Rogers, alto player that had recorded with Lee Morgan. He's on Lee's second recording. And that group of people, wow, consisted of Reggie Workman, McCoy Tyner, Tootie Heath, Mickey Roca, a whole bunch of cats out of Philly.
Right.
So it wasn't hard to be around guys that knew more than me. I mean, these cats were doing it then. I used to go see these guys. I used to go to jam sessions, Kenny Barron, all these cats. I used to go and sit and wait for a tune that I could play on.
Right. Now, was another Philly cat, Benny Golson, who was playing with Art Blakey.
Well, he was older.
He was older, but was Benny an inspiration? Because he's from Philly and he's already.
No. Train was the cat that hit me the hardest.
Okay. Now, when did you recall first hearing Train?
But I didn't like Train when I first heard him.
When did you first hear him?
Well, I first heard him with Miles when it was the quintet. And
You talking about mid '60s, Miles? Before
no,
Cannonball came
but
in?
before Cannonball,
Before
mid-50s.
That's what I said, mid '50s.
I thought you said mid-60s.
No, mid-50s.
Mid-50s.
Okay.
Yeah, before Cannonball.
Right.
And I didn't like him.
Why?
I didn't think he sounded like, Jesus.
Go ahead.
Are
man.
you going to film this?
We filming everything. We're filming everything.
Well, he's no longer here, so I guess I can say it.
Well, you felt how you felt.
He sounded like he didn't know what he was doing. And so he sounded uncertain of himself.
Well,
but you got to realize, I didn't even know what I was talking about. I didn't even know what I was listening to. I didn't even know if the North was North or South was South. But go ahead.
I hear you. But at the same time, when you look at what Train himself said and what you look at his development, he was still searching at that point.
Yeah, but man, please.
He was playing a
please,
lot of horn.
Please, no. Coltrane is I did a blindfold test about 6 years ago for Downbeat.
Right.
And the guy said, I'm going to put a horn player on. I want you to hear this, listen to this guy and tell me who this guy is. He put this alto player on. And I can tell who, anybody who's been around for a while, I can tell. These younger guys, I don't know, because a lot of them sound the same, so I don't know who one from the other.
Right.
But in a lot of the older guys, I can, and I listen, I said, I don't know who this, I said, who is it? I said, I have no idea who this guy is. I said, I hear some Charlie Parker influence. I said, but other than that, I have no idea. It was 1946 Coltrane on alto.
Right.
Unlike the 55 or 56 alto.
Where he was playing with Zoot Sims. and
Right,
them cats,
where you could hear.
That it was him playing.
No, where you could hear that it was a tenor player playing alto.
Ah.
But in 46, it was an alto player playing alto. That's the difference.
Okay.
And when the guy told me that was Coltrane, this was about 6 years ago. I was like, wow. I said, man, I knew this guy traveled a long distance, but I had no idea he traveled this far. Because the thing that used to cause me to wobble was McCoy used to say that Train idolized Charlie Parker, and I couldn't figure that out because I could not hear Charlie Parker and Coltrane. I'm saying, wait a minute, how can he idolize Charlie Parker and I don't hear any Charlie Parker? And so 6 years ago was the first time I heard Charlie Parker and John Coltrane.
Wow. Through that blindfold test.
Through that blindfold test.
Now,
There was a I think it was 1946 recording in Dizzy's band. He was working in Dizzy's band in 1946.
I think that might have been a little later, more like the late 40s. More like late
Okay.
40s or so.
Okay. Well,
but
go ahead.
yeah, because I think that famous picture of Bird and
Diz.
Bird and Train in the
And
back.
he's playing out tenor then.
Right, he's playing tenor then. That was like somewhere in the 50s, but I think he played with Dizzy late 40s. But anyway, describe for us, because you mentioned something that's very intriguing. You mentioned an alto player playing an alto, and you mentioned a tenor player playing alto. All right. So how would you describe?
Wow. Go ahead.
Yeah, how would you describe
The difference.
Yeah.
It's kind of like beauty. You know it when you see it. I don't know how.
You could
else
just, in other words, you could just hear.
Well,
just hear in the way.
well, I don't know. I mean,
But you can hear that if you hear, even if you don't know the cat, and you hear an alto player in terms of. Let me ask you this.
let me
Okay.
try to answer your question by
Okay.
saying that here's what I think I heard.
All right.
Because my explanation will fall short if I don't say what I'm getting ready to say now, and that is, I think what I heard was a guy that used to play alto that no longer played alto, that started playing tenor, and in doing so developed what that was all about, which made it possible for him to come back to the alto but not sound like he used to sound because he hadn't put the time in on the instrument.
Okay.
So that is what I think. In other words, I don't know if I can hear a tenor player who should be playing alto or vice versa. I'm not saying that.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
All right, I got you. No, you
Okay.
made it clear. Now, so let me give you an example and ask you, it's off the cuff, what you think about this. I remember back in the early 90s, I was at the home of a very, very famous trumpet player. And we were talking about different players. And I said, well, what do you think of this one? What do you think of that one? What do you think of that? And I mentioned Kenny Garrett, who was one of my, back in the mid-'80s, OTB, and I mean, he was one of my favorites because he had a distinctive sound. And he said, man, when I hear alto, I want to hear alto. he sounds like a tenor player playing alto. So let me ask you, as an alto player, do you think when you hear Kenny Garrett, for example, that his conception is an alto conception?
No. But people have said to me that I sound like a tenor player on alto.
Okay. Well, I told you that, you know, there's a similar thing. I think you and J Mac had a similar kind
Right,
of
you did say
conception.
that. Right.
You know.
Right.
Okay. All right. So back to your story.
Okay.
All right. So you took some early lessons, fundamentals. You took some theory with Roland Wiggins. Okay. So by the time you're in your mid-20s, you have been putting about 4 hours a day in for a couple of years, I presume, right?
A few years.
A few years.
Yeah.
Okay. You're still working this other gig.
Yeah.
Still raising your family.
I worked that gig for 8 years.
Okay. At what time of the day did you shed?
When I came home from work.
Okay. What did your wife think about
Wow.
this
Well,
saxophone thing?
Her position was she didn't want to be second fiddle to no instrument. She met me before I was playing the instrument, and so we were in conflict with that.
Wow. Okay. How long?
That wasn't the case, but that's how she perceived it.
Okay. Okay. In other, yeah. From your perspective, it was two different things, but she almost looked at it as competition with her because of the time you were devoting to it.
Well, I think, you know, in defense of her, I think one of the things that made it probably hard for her, which is understandable, she met me. I didn't know what a quarter note looked like if it came and slapped me in the face.
Right.
Then all of a sudden I'm gonna pick up an instrument and start playing, and you're gonna do what? And you're gonna play it and do what? And you're gonna what? And so, you know, I think it's understandable that.
From a practical perspective, you got 2 children and such.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I went to work every day. Nobody chased me. Nobody, in spite of all of that, that never was an issue.
Okay.
I just think that we were both very young. She was a little older than me, but we were both very young. And man, I'm gonna tell you, Jack, 72 years old, they need to come to me now. I can give you some answers.
That's why we got you here.
Marriage and all of that stuff, it's not easy.
Right.
You know, I think one of the serious mistakes that people make is that they don't realize that it's very complicated. It requires a lot of effort. It's a lot of understanding, a lot of maturity, a whole lot of things that most of us don't have in the beginning.
You know, after my first marriage didn't make it, I would think that, said, man, people shouldn't be getting married until they're like in their 30s or something, you know, because the maturity piece, you know, is something. Now, did you? How long did y'all last?
Well, I was married for 18 years. We lived together for 12 years married, but I was married for 18 years.
Okay. All right. I'm not getting that.
We were married for 12 years living together, but I was married for 18 years before I got a divorce.
Okay. I think.
Her and I were living together.
No, in other words, there were 6 years that you didn't live together, but you're still married.
I was still, right.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Boy, I'm sorry for being slow sometimes. I'm sorry. You have to forgive me.
No, that's fine.
All right. So, all right. Now, you worked that gig for 8 years.
Yeah.
Tell us about your first professional gig where you got paid for playing the saxophone.
Well, I don't know about getting paid. I don't remember that one, but I do remember my first applaud because I was walking around for about 3 days.
Well, tell us
in
about
a daze.
Tell us about that.
and Kenny Barron was on that gig. Odine Pope. Who else you possibly would know?
Doesn't matter.
Lola Falana. No, that's the political. No, Lola, the dancer that was with Sammy Davis, or Lola.
That was her. That's the name.
Oh, Lola was with Sammy.
Okay, well, she was part of this event
Where was it at?
in Philadelphia.
And you were how old?
I don't know, I was about,
Approximately.
I
Late
don't know,
20s?
I was
Mid-20s?
about 20, somewhere in there. I
Okay.
had gone public. They paid me. They didn't pay me. They played a tune that I could play on, and it was
What?
Bobby Timmons, Benny Golson's "Moaning."
Speaking of Benny.
Yeah, speaking of Benny,
Right.
and so there was a couple of other people. A bass player named Arthur Harper. I don't remember the drummer.
Okay.
Trumpet player named I can't think of his name right now.
Okay,
But anyway,
Can I just say something? I just feel a need to say this because when I was coming up, I'm going to say this and you know what I mean. Lola Falana.
oh boy.
Oh, God. Lola Falana.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just had to get that
Yeah.
out.
Right. Good. But this was before she became Lola Falana.
Right, right. Okay,
This
okay.
was before she met Sammy Davis.
Okay.
And,
So you got your first applause.
and so
you soloed and got
and I soloed and the people applauded and I was like, I walked around like for about 3 days. In a days I just couldn't understand. I was blown away.
But you have been shedding for so long.
Yeah, but that was the first time anybody responded, and I didn't know what to make of it. You know. It was like,
Okay.
wow, yeah.
All right, man. And the first time you with Kenny Barron and cats. Wow. Okay, so tell us now how, from that point, you started to, gig and.
Well, I mean, I went through the usual route. I mean, in those days, I tell you, today.
This would be in the 60s now we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Young cats today, I don't know what to say to them. Because when I was coming up, I mean, man, there were places, there were cats, we would, of course we were younger, we'd go make stuff happen.
Right.
But there was a whole lot of stuff going on.
The scene, a lot of
There's
clubs.
A lot of clubs.
Playing all night.
And so I was working with, I always had to think, I got to make some money because I got a family here. Right. So I was doing a lot of soul bands.
Okay.
R&B, rhythm
soul,
and blues
rhythm and
bands.
blues, yeah.
Kenny Gamble,
Okay.
I was a part of that
Oh, yeah?
entourage of people.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think who else became popular. Anyway, I was working with those bands, and through the years and whatnot, and
Of course, Gamble and Huff, that's the Philly sound.
that was it, Jack.
Yeah.
And so there was a place called The Last Way Out.
The Last Way Out.
And
What a
and
name.
That's the hell of a name, right? And I took a quintet in there,
Okay.
a singer, and a rhythm section and myself. And I told everybody, I said that, and we were working 4 nights a week. I said, you know what? When this gig ends, this band is going to end. I said, because I can't afford to keep this band because I'm losing money with all of the different groups I was working with versus this jazz band. This was a jazz band.
Okay.
And this was my first jazz band as a leader.
Okay.
I've been working with some other people doing jazz, but this was the
As a
one.
leader. When would you say this was approximately?
It was in '67.
67. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we worked this gig for about, 2-3 months, 4 nights a week.
Okay.
Coltrane was interested in coming to this club because we didn't serve. There wasn't any alcohol in there.
Okay.
And he was, at that time, he was trying to get away from that
yeah.
kind of setting and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, Jimmy Mertz used to come down and play.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the attitude of, when this gig ends, this band is going to end. Well, when the gig ended, it wasn't as easy as I thought that I could go back doing what I was doing.
You mean the R&B?
The R&B and whatnot. Mentally, I was having a hard time with it.
Okay.
And
What was hard about it?
well, it just felt like I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I mean, this isn't the music that I mean, because you got to realize, even though when I was working with these rhythm and blues bands and soul bands and whatnot, I had already kind of made the transition into jazz.
Okay.
I started embracing this direction.
Right.
And these bands was to make money, to take care of my family and whatnot.
Right.
And so when the gig ended, it was hard for me to go back to, and I should add, the first night of the gig, I hired Kenny Barron from New York. By this time, Kenny had moved to New York.
Okay.
And when Kenny had heard me for the first time in all of those years, he said, "Man, you ought to come to New York." So that went in one ear. And so anyway, so
At the time.
when it ended, it was hard for me to go back to these rhythm and blues bands.
Okay.
And it was at that point that life really changed.
All right. What happened?
Well, I ran into Coltrane one night. I was on my way downtown, and his mother lived not too far from us. And I was on the bus, and I saw him packing his car off. By this time, I had played with him once. I talked to him a number of times on the phone. I used to go see him and whatnot. So I got off as if he cared, knew who I was and whatnot. Anyway, so I got off the bus, telling him that I was thinking about going to New York to give New York a try and whatnot. And he said, he wished me luck. He said, you're going to do fine. He said, but if you ever get the opportunity to play with Elvin, take it. So I came to New York. And
When was this?
this was in '67.
Okay. Came to New York.
And I was, I was still with my family trying to figure out what we were going to do with this.
Right.
And so by this time, I knew Jimmy Merritt. And so Jimmy, bass player, yeah. And so Jimmy was working on 52nd Street. And Jimmy told me to come on down to Beefsteak Charlie's on 52nd Street because they were having a jam session.
Okay.
Now this was the first week. So I go down to Beefsteak Charlie. The place is packed. The bandstand was against this wall. Horns players were lined up all the way down like that. So I got in the line after paying to get in the club.
Okay.
And so I'm standing in my line waiting to play on this tune and whatnot. So they made an announcement that they had to discontinue the jam sessions because the featured band had to come up. And the featured band consisted of Joe Henderson, Freddie Hubbard, Elvin Jones, Jimmy Merritt, Jane Getz, and me. And the people was like, well, who is this guy playing alto? All I know is when I finished, they applauded and whatnot. The guy on the door gave me my money back.
That was good. That's what he should have done. He said, man, why you tell me you playing the game?
And Elvin introduced himself to me and told me he's working down at Pookie's Pub and would come on down from time to time. And I had a job. I ended up getting a job of, not at that particular time, but about a week or so late because it was a policeman that I knew in Philly who gave up his police job to go into acting, who had a salesman job selling office machines here in New York. So he gave me his job. and he went off to do plays. And
Okay. So you ended up doing sales?
well, I was trying.
Right.
And hanging out. In those days in New York, the clubs was staying open to 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Man, I'm out to 2, 3, 4 in the morning, getting up at 7 to go to work. Are you kidding me? I
Right.
was like, woo,
Right.
in real trouble. And then on the weekends, going home to my family and whatnot.
Because they were still in
They were still in Philly.
Okay.
We were still together. I was
Right.
staying with a friend of mine who I just saw for the first time. It's strange. I'm doing a lot of 30 years here. But I just saw this guy about 2 weeks ago for the first time in about 30, 35 years. I stayed at his place in Brooklyn. And so,
What was his name?
Rashid DeFreplis.
Okay.
And so, so it was during that time that I met Elvin, and I went down to Pookie's Pub. And while I was working down there, while I was coming down there every night, hanging out and trying to play and whatnot,
Yeah.
and Frank Foster was on the gig. So Frank, one night, Frank said to me, he said, I gotta take some time off to write some music for Count Basie. Would you be interested in taking my place? What? Are you kidding me? Come on, man. So I said, yeah. But I didn't, if I'm recalling this correctly, I didn't do anything except register it. And so a short time after, I don't know, days, weeks, whatever, Elvin came up to me and said that Frank is going to have to take some time off to write some music for Basie. Would I be interested? Man, I quit my job before even the gig, before I even was confirmed I had the gig with Elvin. And so I was working with Elvin the night Coltrane died.
Wow.
To make this more spooky, I'm telling you, I live a spooky life. Anyway, it was on my mind to call Train to tell him I was working with Elvin, because he told me if I ever get the opportunity, as if he cared. And I was told that he had just been in the club about 3 weeks before I started working there. That's the last time they saw him. It was on my mind so that we were working 6 nights a week. That Saturday, I went home to Philly and called him that Saturday. And Alice told me he was asleep. He died that Sunday.
Wow.
So that's how it.
Tell us about the time you said you played with Train. Tell us about that time.
Well, that was a church in Philly where I had my band there, and I opened for him, and he had his band, and I asked him could I sit in with him, and he said sure, and we played together. And when it was all over, we were kind of playing freeform and whatnot. And I told him when it was over, I said, man, this is the kind of guy Coltrane was. He was, man, I'm telling you, I've met a lot of people, but I ain't met nobody like Coltrane. I told him, I said, man, because we were like playing together for a while, and I told him, I said, I'm glad you kind of came in because I felt like I had something to grab a hold of, and I was able to follow you. He said, but I was following you. I said, man, get out of here. But that was the kind of guy, I mean, I'm telling you, this cat was the nicest man that I've ever met. I'm really the nicest man I've ever met.
Wow. And we were talking earlier, you probably would say that he would be your biggest influence, not in terms of your style, but just in terms of his impact on you.
Coltrane hit me the hardest. I remember the night. I remember the album. I don't remember where I was. I don't remember whose house I was at.
Right.
But it was a Friday night, and somebody played the original Favorite Things. And when I heard that, I got up early that next morning, bought the record, and played it until it was brown, and that was it. That was it. But prior to that, I was like kind of on the
Yeah.
fence with him because I was a Sonny Rollins guy.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, what did you think of Tenor Madness?
Well, at the time, I thought that Sonny Rollins
Took him.
put him in his place.
And then what'd you think?
No, well,
later?
you have to realize I was really retarded in those earlier years.
I like your honesty, man, about yourself. So obviously your perspective changed after a while.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, now you also mentioned, and we got about 2 minutes on this tape.
Okay.
So just name very quickly your major influences, saxophone influence. You already mentioned Coltrane, you mentioned Sonny Rollins. Tell us about some others.
Cannonball, Eric Dolphy, and Sonny Stitt.
Ah, okay. All right. And say something quick about each of them. Like when I say Cannonball, what comes to mind?
All I can say is when people talk about Coltrane, they need to save a little room for Cannonball. Because whatever they say about Coltrane, they need to say it about Cannonball.
Oh, all right. I mean, some of those.
Heck of a dude.
Yeah.
Heck of a dude.
You knew him?
Oh man, Cannonball. Heck of a dude.
When did you first meet Cannonball?
Oh God, Jesus. Yeah, I don't think I met Cannonball until I started working with Mongo in the around 68, 69, 70.
68, 69. Okay. All right. So, and would that be when you first heard him live also?
Oh no.
Ah, when did you first hear him live?
Oh, I first heard him before he even joined Miles.
Oh.
Because this guy I was telling you about, Kenny Rogers,
Was a big Cannonball.
was talking about Cannonball before anybody was talking about Cannonball.
Had Cannonball, but he had come to New York though. He came to New York in '55 and had his big thing at the Cafe Bohemia.
And evidently, I think Kenny was aware of him
Because he was in Florida before that.
Right, because Kenny mentioned him.
Huh.
But and because of him, I remember going to see him in a place in Philly called the Showboat, and there was hardly anybody in the place with him and his brother.
Nat. And what was it like here in Cannonball?
Well, to seeing him and then and through the years, I mean, Cannon was just perfect, man. That cat was perfect. He was perfect.
Yeah.
Well, all those cats were perfect. I mean, Coltrane. The trouble that I go through playing the saxophone, I've never seen or saw any of those guys go through. Every day it seemed like they had no mouthpiece problem. Well, Train always had mouthpiece problems. Let him tell it.
Right.
But he didn't act like it. And Sonny Rollins messed around with mouthpieces too. And Sonny's sound would change, but the rest of these guys, their sounds would stay the same. Eric Dolphy, sound the same. Cannonball, Coltrane. They all they sound perfect. Sonny Stitt, they sound perfect. I never saw these guys have any trouble with mouthpiece, reed, saxophone, nothing.
Right.
I said, man, how you guys do this night after night after night after night? I can hardly go through 3 days without complaining.
All right, so let me ask you this. two of the ones you mentioned. We mentioned Tenor Madness with Train and Sonny Rollins. Now what about the Eternal Triangle
With Sonny Stitt.
with Sonny Stitt,
And Dizzy Gillespie.
and Sonny Rollins?
And Sonny Rollins.
Now, who did you think took that one between Sonny Stitt and Sonny Rollins?
Well,
Don't hedge now.
no. What I'm trying to get to is that because that's an interesting question that you're asking me, because I actually hear Sonny Rollins. I never liked Sonny Stitt playing tenor.
Interesting.
And so whenever he picked up the tenor, it was like, come on, man. But when he picked up the alto, it was like, wow. And so I never, I'm actually making a comparison now, because through the years, I always saw them separate. Sonny on alto, and Sonny Stitt on alto, and Sonny Rollins on tenor.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Because I never did. Sonny Stitt didn't play the tenor the way he played the alto. He sounded more like a Lester Young or somebody on tenor, whereas on alto he sounded more, for lack of description, in both of these cases of Lester Young. But the bad rap for Sonny was that he sounds like Charlie Parker, which I don't agree with that. But that was and also that was what I heard in those two horns, two different guys.
Okay.
And one guy playing two different horns.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Let me ask you, along with Cannonball, as far as alto, and that's what I played, one of my early heroes was Phil Woods. What'd you think of Phil?
Phil was a good player. I thought Phil was a very good player. But he wasn't a Charlie Parker. He wasn't a Cannonball.
Well, who was Charlie
He wasn't
Parker?
a Sonny Stitt, and he wasn't an Eric Dolphy.
Okay.
I mean, there
So
was a lot of horn players.
Right.
You know, you said Jackie McLean. I knew all these guys. I heard all of them, but they didn't hit me that hard. These guys that I'm mentioning to you, these cats, man, and they all play kind of differently. But in the alto family, an Eric Dolphy, a Cannonball, and a Sonny Stitt.
Eric Dolphy, he's
I know. Go
what?
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say he's unique.
Yeah, well, they all were.
Yeah, all were unique. But what was it about Eric Dolphy's playing that appealed to you?
Well, I recognize the fact that when he was with Coltrane, it wasn't the same.
How do you mean?
I used to talk to McCoy about this, and he kind of gave me an inkling of sort, but because it felt like he wasn't a part of that band, of the Coltrane band.
Right.
And
It was like he was an appendage or an add-on.
I mean, they played one way, and he approached it from somewhere else. I recognize that.
Okay.
But the thing that I dug about Eric was his uniqueness, number one, his musicianship, number two. I mean, he sounded the same on all of those instruments. And from what I understand,
Flute, bass, clarinet,
and alto, you
yeah.
couldn't tell which one he favored. I mean, he sounded the same on all of them to me. He played all those crazy intervals and whatnot. He played them on flute. He played them on bass clarinet. He played them on alto.
Okay.
But his alto sound was very solid and matured.
Okay.
I mean, I've always liked a matured kind of a sound on alto.
When you say mature, you mean like seasoned, round, their own voice, all of that?
All of that. Intonation, seasoned, round, beautiful, all of the good stuff.
Okay. I mean, there's a couple of others. I'm curious about.
Now, there's other guys that's good. Johnny Hodges, I know. Go
Benny
ahead.
Carter. No,
Benny
I mean, I
Carter.
wasn't necessarily
go ahead.
No, that's okay. But I mean, because Johnny Hodges and Benny Carter and Bird were the ones that.
Willie Smith.
Yeah, Willie Smith too. Yeah. But in terms of Cannonball's influences, he's like synthesized those cats. But in terms of unique voices, I'm
gonna tell you a story about Cannonball.
Why don't you go ahead?
Well, the story is actually Benny Carter.
Okay.
In the 80s, I heard I was over someone's house in the 80s, and I heard some old recordings, some 1931, 32, somewhere in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a blindfold test that I wasn't, I was listening to the radio. The radio announcer, the DJ, didn't mention who these musicians were.
Right.
And I was listening. I said, "Man, this guy here." I said, "Who is this guy playing this alto?" I said, "Wow." I said, "No, must be something contemporary." And I kept listening. I said, "No, this sounds like the original, like some old stuff." I said, "Who is this guy?" I said, "I don't know who this guy is, but for the first time I'm hearing where Charlie Parker came from." Wow. It was 1932, Benny Carter. Wow. And so in the 80s, around 85, yeah, this is the 80s too, yeah. Around 85, oh man, Jesus, wait a minute.
Coming back, stuff is coming back.
In 85, I heard a 1970 something recording of Benny Carter in Japan with Kenny Barron.
Okay.
And he sounded like Cannonball to me. And I was like, wait a minute.
But he was a major influence on Cannonball.
And then I heard on KCR, I think it was.
Phil Schaap.
But maybe in the 70s or whenever. I'm trying to recall. I'm getting my years messed up right here, but the events stuck with me. And I heard Benny Carter playing what Cannonball played. You know, Cannonball did a string album with Polka Dots and Moonbeams and Surrey with the Fringe on top and so on. I heard Benny Carter playing these same tunes.
That's interesting.
I was saying, wait a minute.
That's interesting.
So when I was working with Nat, I told Nat, I said, wait a minute. Because this was at the time I was working with Nat.
Nat Adderley.
And I said, man, I don't remember Nat Cannon ever talking about Benny Carter. And Nat said, oh man, are you kidding? So that's the Benny Carter story from the Cannonball.
Right, the lineage.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all connected. You know.
All right, all right. I think we started a little late, but we've gone for about an hour. So we take a short break. We take about a 5-minute break for you to be able to stretch a little bit, get some water in the bag, use the bathroom. But I think we've had a good first hour. And if you agree, give Sonny Fortune a hand.
Oh, God. Thank you.
Yes, sir. State your name and your question.
Sylvester, and I was interested in that remark you talked about telling tenor players who play alto and alto players who play tenor. Well, one record that I'm sure that you know about, Bird playing tenor on one of Miles's collector's item. What's your comment about Bird on tenor on that album?
Well, yeah, I'm familiar with the album, and if I'm recalling correctly, because it's been a long time since I've heard this particular recording.
Bird and Sonny Rollins on it, and both on tenor, and I was
Oh no, I'm thinking of something else. I don't know if
Miles is playing trumpet, right?
Miles is playing trumpet, but
Right.
it's just collectors. It's called, I think, the Collectors something.
well, is that the only recording that he played tenor on?
That's the only one I know.
Well, then I've heard it because I don't remember Sonny Rollins being on it, but if he was, I can't really speak to that because I don't remember Sonny Rollins. I do remember Charlie Parker playing tenor, and what I would say about Sonny Stitt, I wouldn't say about Charlie Parker. I heard Charlie Parker's licks in the tenor, but I personally preferred him on alto, number one. But if I'm recalling correctly, I seem like I remember hearing some of his familiar licks on tenor, whereas Sonny Stitt used to tried to play a different way, try to approach the horn differently. At least that's the impression that I got from it, where he, to me, sound like where Charlie Parker wasn't necessarily idolizing or whatever in regards to Lester Young, because he was influenced by Lester Young as well, from what I understand. I never saw Bird in person, but and Sonny Stitt sound like he tried to sound like Lester Young, whereas Bird just sound, hey, I don't have an alto, you giving me a tenor, okay, I'll play it. Whereas Sonny Stitt sound like he was trying to be someone else on tenor, which I felt he was more of what I liked on alto. He was unbelievable on alto.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Don Payne. What are some of your thoughts on a swinger alto player by the name of Earl Bostic?
Earl Bostic. You know, in my doo-wop days, I heard Earl Bostic. I guess because he was playing more commercial presentation, because I remember recordings of him. I tell you the truth, I don't really have an opinion, because I don't really remember, other than I used to hear people say that he used to play all the high notes or whatever. From what I recall, he didn't make an impression on me, but I do remember hearing him before, because I think he had a couple of hits that were somewhat popular.
A few others.
Flamingo, okay.
Yeah.
Where, but in comparison to Charlie Parker,
Different style.
yeah, completely different style. I would say Bird. Well, Bird, to me, Bird was the beginning of putting, for lack of a better word, and this may, for people who know a little further than myself, may disagree with what I'm getting ready to say, because maybe people like Duke Ellington deserve what I'm getting ready to say. But Charlie Parker, to me, was the one that put the sophistication in this music, or was in the beginning of putting the sophistication in this music, by playing complex melodies and intervals and embellishing on chords and whatnot.
And higher intervals of chords.
The higher intervals, the higher end of chords and whatnot. And did it with a lot of legitimacy, because Charlie Parker had an incredible sound. I mean, he wasn't a huffing and puffing alto player. He was truly an alto player.
I thought Cannon's sound was even better than Bird's.
Oh, a Cannonball?
Yes.
I agree.
You're not gonna argue with him, huh?
I won't argue with you there.
I saw both in person.
Oh, well, I never saw Bird in person, but I think Cannonball was perfect.
Did you ever hear him play Poor Butterfly?
Who, Cannonball?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I heard Cannonball play everything.
Everything.
Cannonball was perfect. You do hear a Bird from time to time sound like having reed problems. or whatever. But Cannonball, he never had weed problems. This cat never had any kind of problem. He was an incredible cat, man. Cannonball was really a beautiful cat, a very intellectual cat, very social cat, very and yet could play the daylights out of this music.
I took my kids to see Cannonball at the Apollo when he had Yusuf Lateef with him.
Okay.
Oh, man.
In the group. That was some, and Nancy Wilson was singing.
Yeah. Okay.
That was some group. My kids were little at the time, and then it made such a big impression.
I bet it did.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
All right, so let me jump back in. Tell us about your time with Mongo Santa Maria. How'd that come about?
Well,
Okay, now let's get the lights. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir.
that actually came about from a friend of mine in Philly had recommended me for the band. This was after Hubert, Bobby Capers,
Hubert Laws.
and Marty Scheller, who I speak to. I get an email from him at least 2 or 3 times a week,
Okay.
even now.
What's his name?
Marty Scheller, the trumpet player.
Okay.
I joined the band after those guys,
Mm-hmm.
and it was through a recommendation of a friend of mine in Philly. It was actually my first gig of traveling around. Matter of fact, I mean, Mongo was a cat that, well, you know, I tell you, man, I've been very, I don't want to use the word fortunate. I've been
Blessed.
very blessed.
Blessed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with all the great people. I mean, I was just telling somebody this within the past 2 or 3 weeks. I've forgotten what the gist of the conversation was about. But I've
Go ahead, name him. Where do you begin? Mongo.
I worked with
Miles.
Mongo, Miles, Buddy Rich, McCoy, Elvin, Nat Adderley. I mean, these were some very, very special people. They were musicians, but they were also very special people.
So let's talk about each of them as people.
Okay.
Mongo Santa Maria. What would you say about Mongo?
First and only guy I drew unemployment from.
Look at that. So his business was straight, huh?
First, well,
How many years were you with Mongo?
about 2.5 years.
About 2.5
almost
years.
3 years.
Okay, all right.
I was part of. He did Watermelon Man,
Mm-hmm. That was a big hit for
and
him.
that was a big hit.
Yeah, Herbie.
And then his second big hit featured me, Cloud 9,
Okay.
and we were doing all of this fusion music, and I was actually heading in that direction. I didn't want to go that direction, so I had a couple of offers for recordings because of that, but I didn't want to go in that direction.
What direction did you want to
Well,
go?
I wanted to go into. I came to New York because of Coltrane, that band, McCoy. That was the reason why I came to New York. I was in pursuit of this music.
Okay, all right. So then, how and when did you get with Miles?
Well, I after Mongo broke up his band, I moved to California. I stayed in Los Angeles for about 10 months. I couldn't handle it.
Why?
With the seasons, I just couldn't get used to everything looked the same all year long. I just could not get used to that.
Okay.
And the winter looked the same as the spring. I said, man, what in the world is going on here? But I came back to New York going after the McCoy gig.
Okay.
And when I came back, eventually, I ended up getting that gig with McCoy.
All right. Who was in that band?
When I joined the band, it was Herbie Lewis, Eric Cravat, Woody Shaw, McCoy, and myself.
Okay.
So when McCoy broke the band down to a quartet, I was like, wow. And Miles,
So wait a second now. So what happened to Woody?
I don't know. He just broke the band down to a quartet.
Okay.
I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
So when I was working with McCoy, Miles hit on me to join the band. I ended up doing a recording with Miles during that period.
Okay. What was the recording?
The Big Fun on the Corner. No,
Okay.
no. Big Fun was what I did in the band. On the Corner, I think
Okay.
was the recording. I was on like 1 or 2 tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to leave McCoy because it was a quartet and he was giving me all the room and whatnot. And when I started working with Miles, Miles asked me, Sonny, why didn't you come when I asked you to join the band?
Boy, close your eyes and.
And I said, well, Miles, McCoy was kind of giving me a lot of room and whatnot, and he said, well, I'm not going to be able to say what he
Yes,
said.
you can.
No.
Yes, you can. You ain't got no FCC up in here.
Well, I mean, but we got people to respect.
Well, that's up to you.
But I can't say it and with his voice and omit his language.
Well, go ahead. Well, you're imitating him, so it's not you, it's him. So
Well, anyway, he said that he didn't mess with his horn players, and
he didn't F with his own players. Is that what Okay.
and that was the end of it. But he confronted me with why didn't I come with him when.
Okay.
I was
So,
working
well, I want to
with-
know, but what did he mean by that? Because I mean, okay, when he said he didn't mess with it.
Well, I didn't go any further with it because I was working with him at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. He felt. He said, I said what he asked me a question, I gave him an answer.
And that's what
he
he
gave
said,
a
response.
reply, and I left it
Left it
alone
there. Okay.
because I wasn't trying to go any further with it.
So how would you describe Miles as a person?
Funniest guy, I tell you, cat used to keep me in stitches. I tell you, the funniest cat.
Now, see, most people wouldn't even know that or think of Miles in that context.
Miles, Jesus Christ, I'm telling you.
Can you give an example? Give one anecdote?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a story that since you got a camera here,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to give you because it may be circulating, and what's circulating is only half of the story.
All right.
And the irony is, whoever's circulating it know the whole story, but for some reason they've chosen to tell half of the story.
So you're going to give the other half?
So I'm gonna
the
tell the whole story.
All right.
And
All right.
And
And
whenever,
exclusive.
and when you hear it again, you'll say and half of the story is and the rest of the story.
Ah.
And so it kind of goes like this. I was working with Miles. You know, Miles always try to find, I guess, whatever in you. And there was a guy who used to come on television, JGE. They used to sell appliances on television. They sold refrigerators and television and air conditioners. And this was in the 70s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and he used to wear his shirt out like I got mine now.
Okay.
And so Miles called me JGE. Hey, JGE. Because I used to wear silk shirts, but I used to wear them out. So I called him Flash. I said, hey, Flash. So that went on for the longest. Hey, JGE. I said, what's going on, Flash? How you doing? And so one night we were down at the Bottom Line. So Al Muzan came in, a drummer. He had on green shoes, green hat, green coat, green pants, green shirt, green tie, everything. So he came to see the band. So we were in the studio the next day. So now we have been going for the longest. Hey, JG. Hey, Flash, what's going on? And we left it right there. Nobody. So we're in the studio the next night after the Bottom Line. And he comes up to me in the studio. He said, you know, you always calling me Flash. Did you see Al Muzan last night? I knew I had him. I said, yeah, I saw him. I said, man, I don't know, Miles, you may have a point there. Because he was more or less saying that he was, other words, we were calling each other names, but he was more bothered by me calling him Flash than I was by him calling me JGE, is
Okay.
basically the story.
Okay.
So that's the whole story.
So the half that's usually heard is the Al Muzan part?
No, the half that's usually heard is he used to call me JGE.
Oh, but the Flash part isn't told.
And the Flash part isn't told.
Ah.
And the other part that isn't told is that when he came in the studio and acknowledged Al Muzan last night, then did you see Al Muzan last night in the club? I said, yeah, Miles, I saw him. He said, you always calling me Flash, because Miles used to wear all them flashy
So
clothes.
you saying, now that was Flash.
Yeah, that's what he was
Basically,
saying.
okay.
But that was during the time when he was being very flamboyant. But when I saw Miles in the 50s, in the late 50s and the 60s,
Esquire.
cleaner than the
GQ.
Board of Health.
GQ. Yeah. Matter of fact, he was in Esquire.
Yeah,
you know,
listen.
best dressed.
Yeah,
and that kind
Miles
of thing.
was clean, Jack.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Now, what about some other folks that you can tell us about that you had some experience playing with?
Well, and I got the gig with Miles the second time. I had been working with Buddy Rich
Okay.
and Buddy's Club, Buddy's
Okay.
Place, around 60-something 2nd Avenue. I opened the club.
Wow.
And we were.
What size group?
It was a sextet.
Okay.
It
Who
was
else was
me,
in the
Sal
band?
Nistico, Kenny Barron,
Mystical. Wow.
Anthony Jackson, and a conga player. I can't think of this guy's name. And Buddy.
Wow. Sal Nistico. People don't talk about Sal Nistico. That was a play
and we
Italian
worked
boy.
every night.
Okay. Every night.
Buddy would find gigs for the nights that we were off. We worked 6 nights. He would find gigs on the off nights.
Wow.
We worked every night. I tell you one, I didn't know much about him, but when I worked with him, I walked away with a whole lot of respect, because what became crystal clear to me, that all of the shenanigans associated with Buddy Rich, because there's a tape that was circulating that's very whatever. I tell people I never saw any of that. Never saw any of what was on that tape.
Who are you talking about? Wait, people talking about him or
Talking about it.
Oh, talking about it.
And
Okay.
about how
He was
difficult and whatnot, because
Right.
this tape is what. But I was working with him. I'm kind of losing my track here, but I'm trying to get to the Miles thing, and I went somewhere else. But anyway, I was working with him, and we were getting ready to go on the road. I never went on the road with him. That may be what made the difference, because I never saw him on the road.
Okay.
We worked right here in New York every night. Okay. And so actually it's the only gig that I've had in the music business where I worked one place as long as I did with him.
Okay.
It was about 4 or 5 months in his club.
Okay.
And so Max Gordon at the Vanguard came to see me came to see the band just before we were getting ready to leave Buddy's club to go on the road. And Max asked me, did I want to bring a band in the Vanguard? I said, are you kidding? I'll be right there. Because I used to be there. I used to work there all the time with McCoy.
Okay.
And so he said, and then in the first couple of nights, he said, Sonny, don't worry. If nobody show up, I don't care. I like you. I'll keep bringing you back. And when I said, so the last night, Miles was over in the corner where, the bandstand is, and there's a pole there, right over there. Miles was behind that pole. And when I came from solo and I came over to kind of rest from a solo,
You look over.
and Miles was, you enjoy my band. And I was getting ready, Buddy was getting ready to go on the road. I said, I'll be right there. And I went back and told our buddies, Sammy, I can't think of his manager, Sammy. Anyway, I told Sammy, I said, man, I'm not gonna be able to go on the road because I'm a Miles. He said, man, you gonna go with Miles and leave? But I said, yeah. Hey, but Miles called me. I'm going with Miles. So that's how I ended up going with Miles.
I see. Okay.
So I never did go on the road with Buddy.
Okay. All right. McCoy, how would you describe McCoy as a person? McCoy Tyner.
Well, I used to see McCoy, him and his wife, before they got married. They used to walk by me and my wife before we got married because his wife lived around the corner from my wife.
In
my
Philly.
ex-wife.
This is in Philly.
Ex-wife.
Yes, sir.
This was in Philly.
Right.
As a piano player, well, there's certain guys I call magicians. That whole band, Coltrane's band, was a magical band. Elvin, McCoy, those cats were magicians. I mean, they do something to music that you can't put on paper.
Mm.
And McCoy is absolutely one of those guys. He played the piano like nobody I ever heard.
Okay. Were you close
Quite-
with McCoy?
Yeah, I was close. I mean, he knew of our connection with
Philly.
Philadelphia and whatnot. Close. I don't want to.
Mischaracterized.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say yeah. We almost died together out in California. I mean, not California. Out in Seattle, Washington.
What happened?
Well, I was driving his car
Uh-huh.
that used to have to do this to get it to do that. The front end alignment was in real trouble.
Okay.
We drove that car to California and back, and we had just finished a concert in Seattle, Washington. It was him and I, Al Muzan, and Calvin Hill, and we were on our way back to New York, and I'm driving in an area, and it had been raining. And so I'm driving like about 35, 40 miles an hour. And we entered a major highway where it went to 70 miles an hour. And I stepped down on the gas, and McCoy had a station wagon, and we had all our luggage and the musical equipment and stuff in the station wagon. I stepped down on the gas, and the station wagon started swerving. And the swerves were getting bigger and bigger as I was going down the highway like that. And the diesel was pumping his brakes behind me to avoid running over us. And I'm up here, everybody was asleep. McCoy woke up, he said, Sonny, and grabbed me by, he said, man, I said, man, I'm trying to get this car under control, man. And the car was going like this, and I came up alongside a Volkswagen. I thought I hit him with the front of the car, but evidently I did this and knocked him off the highway and broke the swerves. And it made it possible for me to get the car under control. Man, I was so whatever, I couldn't even move. I must have stopped about a block or two from the incident. McCoy and them jumped out of the car. The guy in the diesel, we were in the part of New York, in Washington State, where the road has got a wide divider. It's about a 3 or 4 lane going each way with a huge divider wide enough to put about 3 lanes between them, 3 or 4 lanes between them. This guy went in the lanes, humped his horn, and kept on going. Once he saw that everything was under control, I was so scared I couldn't even move from behind the steering wheel. These guys ran back there. When I eventually came back to where the accident was, this guy's Volkswagen was knocked off the highway. The door was smashed in, blood running down the guy's arm. I said, man, are you okay? He said, man, I'm fine. He said, man, I thought that was it. He said, I can always get another car, because I remember seeing him as I was coming at him, and he was like,
Wow.
so,
Wow.
so we all, he and the rest of us, we went and had some coffee. And then got back on the highway. I couldn't drive.
Okay.
And I woke up, at one time, because we were on Route 80.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were, and that runs through South Dakota, I think.
Okay.
I woke up and McCoy was doing 5 miles an hour skidding on the highway.
Oh my God.
Because it was snowing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I learned a lot from that trip. You don't drive across country in October, November, nor March or April.
Okay.
Because you don't know what you're going to encounter weather-wise.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so every time I see him now, I ask him, I say, have you driven cross country lately? He said, no, man.
Tell us about your record label.
Well,
What's the name of the record label?
the record label is from a record that I did in the 80s that was a commercial. I did 2 commercial records, and the jazz community tore me up. So
What were those records, if you don't mind?
one of them was called Infinity Is, and the one in reference to what you asked me was called With Sound Reason. With Sound Reason. It was an attempt, like most of my titles, attempt to make a statement of sorts. And that title was trying to address that album.
Okay.
Matter of fact, that album brought the end of my relationship with Atlantic, because the executive, I was so messed up I couldn't even write a quarter note. I mean, behind trying to address this commercialism.
So the label, was it the label
I was
that
with
was
Atlantic
pushed,
Records. I had up until recently, I had the most money I ever had in the bank from doing this commercial stuff with Atlantic Records.
This would be in the 80s?
This was the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
But I was so uptight, I couldn't create anything. I couldn't even write a quarter note. I guess it was because I was doing something that I didn't want to do. Was trying to make this thing work. Because when you get in the record business, you're dealing with people that are trying to sell records. And so on this particular album, my guy that was in charge of me with, and I like telling this story because it's the story.
With the A&R or something?
Yeah, the A&R guy. And so when these commercial records, once you, I learned a lot from that as well. Once you dabble in that, you got to keep going, because dabbling is not enough. And so this was my second one, the second dabble. And so my A&R guy said to me on this one particular track, he said, "Man, wow, this is a great track, man." He said, "This track sounds great. I with voices." I told him, I said, "Man, I don't hear no voices," and that was the end of me in Atlantic. Because I told him, I said, "No," I said, "Man, you give me the 51 and you take the 49, because I'm trying to do a 50-50 here, and I can't go no further." They were complaining, "Well, Sonny, you're doing these electric recordings, and when somebody goes see you, they see you with a bass, a piano, and drums." And I said, "Well, if you all buy it, I'll play it. I'm not gonna buy this stuff because I don't with the electric synthesizers and whatnot. That's where I had all that stuff on my recordings." Right. So, and that was part of my frustration. That was what had me all balled up in a knot. I was trying to make this thing work, and so anyway. The title was With Sound Reason. In other words, I'm trying to do this to make some sense out of it. There wasn't any compositions named. That was just a title. Okay. And so when it came time to start my label, I liked that title so that I took the
Sound Reason.
The Sound Reason. That's the name. That's the name of my label.
Why did you decide to start your own label? And this was how long ago?
About about 8 years ago.
Okay, so this would be about 2003 or so.
Yeah, somewhere in there, right.
Mm-hmm.
I started it because jazz is going through what it's going through. It's having a hard time. And most of the people that can see, years ago it may have had merits. At least this is how I'm seeing it now. Years ago it may have had merits, but today it doesn't.
What's the it?
And the it is record companies or whatever could make a difference. The way things are now, the way this music is structured now, I keep telling people that with my label, I'm putting in about 5 to 10% of what I should be doing, but it's the smartest move I've ever made.
Why?
Well, because I do what I want to do. I do it how I want to do it. I do it when I want to do it, where I want to do it, who I want to do it with.
All right.
I'm in absolute control of it.
Okay.
You know, and that's as a creative artist, that is what I am more concerned about than anything else.
It's very interesting because, I mean, at your age and stage of your life and career, that's right at where the industry actually is in terms of what you have to do. It's like musicians have to be more entrepreneurial these days. But would you say it's the case? And it's kind of a leading question because it seems to me that it's not, that a lot of the musicians of your generation are not necessarily being entrepreneurial and doing their own thing, or maybe I'm wrong.
Greg, you asking me a very, whoa. I was part of Strata East.
Tell us.
And I say this, if Strata East had survived, jazz wouldn't be in the situation it's in today.
What is the, what?
Because it was an
Strata?
artist-owned label, artists being aware of all of what needs to be done. The problem with Strata East was that we did it at a time when nobody knew nothing.
This is
We
in
didn't
the
know
70s.
anything.
This is in the 70s.
In the 70s. We didn't know it. I remember going down to Boomers one night because I was part of one of the people who brought down Strata East because of a gentleman who just passed about 2 weeks ago, Gil Scott Herring. Gil Scott had a recording on Strata East that was, Strata East couldn't do anything but concentrate on that recording. And there was about 25 or 30 artists that had paid, certainly I had paid for my product, and with the understanding that I was with a label, we were collectively, but they couldn't give us the attention that was necessary. And so we ended up getting into a whole lot of whatever, but I remember running down a Boomers one night and saying, as I walked, I said, you know, this label is surviving off of none of us know what we're doing. We don't know, we don't have the slightest idea of what we're doing. Had it survived, we'd be in a different reality as far as this music is today. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is my personal opinion, back to what I said to you earlier about getting involved in this music, when forcing myself to embrace it, because I saw it as being something that I was going to have to get smarter, step up into, become more wiser, and so on and so forth. So I've suffered from this crazy illness of calling this an art form. You know.
What do you mean a crazy
illness? Well,
illness?
because
it is an art form.
Well, Max was the only one that I ever heard that really put an emphasis on an art form. Everybody else kinds of jazz is whatever. And so with that in mind, I feel that my generation we haven't done enough. We didn't do enough to survive this music, to give this music life. No, we did not.
Okay. All right. Now, we're going to open it back up to you all so that you can have the last part of our discussion tonight to make a statement, to ask a question. All right. If you have a question, raise your hand. First of all, say your name. Okay, this gentleman right here.
Greetings. My name's Andy Snyder from Vermont.
Okay,
It's a
Andy.
delight to hear you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I would ask for all your experience and talent and great gifts that you've brought to music and to the industry, and as you've just described in terms of the difficulties, how would you encourage those who follow you, whose footsteps they're gonna walk in yours, with all the changes around production, technology, digital age, as well as what jazz now faces?
Well, here's what I would say. And you kind of have to be kind of young enough to do this, because when I was younger, I go anywhere. I get a piano player, a drummer. We go anywhere. We go to somebody's house. We go to a bar. We go outside. We go stand on the corner. We do whatever is necessary to play this music. I would say to anybody today, that's what you got to do. You got to insist on this is what you want to do and this is how you want to do it, because you're up against some incredible odds. I mean, there's so many directions musically out here today that I don't know where jazz, the record labels don't even embrace jazz anymore. You know.
Even though there are some good ones, there's some good independent labels.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
but you're
right,
talking about
right.
there's
Right,
like
but
the
the,
four-
but the
big-
major
the
when you're speaking of the record industry, you're not even talking about the jazz music.
Right.
You know.
Yes, pop.
So for someone that's coming up, but one of the things that I've always said about this music is that for a young person who's pursuing music, who wants to develop, who wants to be challenged, who wants to explore the possibilities, I don't know any other form that'll allow you to do all of that. I mean, even in classical music, you want a great sound, you want good intonation. The only difference between classical music and jazz is spontaneous improvisation. If you're into spontaneous, creative music, I don't know where else to go. So, as a young person, where you can kind of be half crazy and people won't make a whole lot out of it, I would say, do whatever you got to do. And matter of fact, I would encourage most young musicians who are pursuing this music to stand on a corner, go to people's houses, or whatever you got to do to make sure that you're playing this music. Because that's what I did.
All right. All right. Anyone else? Yes, Peter.
Peter, of all the places you've been to around the world, give me a place that really got you.
Oh boy.
Place that you might say, gee, I want to go back there.
New York. New York, really. If for me to zero in on it, I keep telling people, if you really want to punish me, give me 52 weeks in New York, because I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
I went the last thing out and the first thing back. I'm up
You're
here.
from Philly, but you're in New York.
No, I'm in New York. I've been here for 43 years. And I remember saying to myself, am I going to be able to stay here for 20 years? I don't know what happened to those other 23 years. All I know is I've been here since 1967 and still haven't gotten enough of the place.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes.
Would you
Tell us your name first.
Oh, Deborah Ackerman. Would you tell us a good story about Max Roach?
About who?
Max Roach?
Max Roach. Well, the story that comes to my mind instantly is his point of view of this art form. I quote Max. Max says, well, when we were coming up, we used to play on 52nd Street from 9 to 4. He said, and then from around 5 to 7 or 5 to 10, we'd come uptown and play at Minton's. He said, you try that for about a year or so, and you'll have an art form as well.
All that time.
That's true.
Yeah, that's deep. Okay. That's serious.
You know, because that's one of the things, that's why I was saying in terms of the young man, because that's one of the problems that's out here now. We're not playing enough. You know, and see, I'm from the and I'm not even certain I'm from anywhere, because prior to my arrival, cats would work one place for like 3 or 4 months. You know, I only did that once. You remember I told you with Buddy Rich, and that's because there is where you really, I mean, this music, night after night, frustrated because you just got finished doing this last night. Now, what can I do tonight? Before you know it, 6 months of that or a year of that, man, you really have done something.
And you also really gel with an ensemble.
Now, you really have gelled with it. I just came off of the road with this band, the 4 Generations of Miles.
Who's in the band?
Jimmy Cobb, Buster Williams, and Mike Stern. And this Christmas will be my 3rd year with the band. I took George Coleman's place prior to this tour that we just did, and a gig that we did about 2 months earlier, 3 months in Detroit. We had just been working the Iridium Christmas week. We'll be there this Christmas. And we did a 12-day tour from Oakland to Minneapolis and ended up in Seattle. And night after night, I mean, we actually, because when I first, the 4 Generations, I told the agent who booked us, I said, what we were able to accomplish on this gig, on this tour, was pretty interesting. I said, because we're calling ourselves 4 Generations of Miles, and yet we're only really playing the kind of blue, period, because of Jimmy Cobb. And we're playing music from that period. But what we did on this tour, because of Mike and I was in the band when it was psychedelic. and Mike Stern, yeah. And so Mike, while we were on this tune, between ballads, he plays the ballad on the first set, I play a ballad on the second set, and we kind of loosened up. But between ballads, we play some stuff that was comparable to like when we were playing with Miles, some funk kind of stuff. We have no idea what it's going to be, where it's going to go, and we messed around with it for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then that segues into the ballad. The challenge is to get out of where we're at into this ballad here. And so I told the agent, I said, it actually represented 4 Generations of Miles now. Because we're playing the kind of blue period, right, and we're playing the funk or psychedelic period when it was with Miles.
Okay, all right. Okay, we're gonna do, let's see. Actually, let me take the final. Okay. What would you like your musical legacy to be remembered as?
Oh, man. Cat that kept trying.
Yeah.
Because I'm still trying.
All right. And you said it's only in the last couple of years that you feel that your sound has gotten where
the last 2 to 3 years.
Last 2 to 3 years. And you're 72 now?
Yeah.
You got a long way to go.
All right. Well, thank you for keeping on trying. You make sure to keep on trying. Thank you so much. All right. Mr. Sonny Fortune. Yeah. All right. You're getting that applause again.
All right.
Well,
man.
thank you, and thank you so
much.
much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. I'm actually pleasantly surprised.
All right, I told you, man.
Yeah.
All right, so y'all get home safely now.